The wind on the moors never sleeps. It howls across the desolate land like a predator, clawing at stone, rattling windows, and whispering secrets only the desperate can hear. They say it carries voices, whispers of grief, rage, and a love that has twisted into something monstrous. It was into this wild, haunted land that Mr. Lockwood came, a man who thought himself above superstition. He rented a house called Thrushcross Grange, seeking peace and quiet, not knowing the moors never grant such things. His first visit was to his landlord at Wuthering Heights. The house rose before him like a fortress against the storm, dark, forbidding, with grotesque carvings and a name that sounded like violence itself. Inside, the air was just as hostile. Dogs prowled with suspicious eyes, and the master of the house, Heathcliff, stood apart from them all. He was a man carved from hardship, dark and silent, but his eyes held a fire that burned with an intensity Lockwood had never seen. This was not a man shaped by ordinary suffering. That night, trapped by a sudden blizzard, Lockwood was forced to stay. He slept in a small, unused chamber, where the name Catherine had been scratched into the walls over and over again as he drifted off. His sleep turned into a nightmare. A branch scraped the window like skeletal fingers, and a voice sobbed outside, begging to be let in. Lockwood, terrified, forced the window open. An ice-cold hand grabbed his wrist. "Let me in," the voice cried. "I've been wandering for 20 years." He screamed. The house fell silent. But at dawn, Lockwood saw Heathcliff standing by that same window, calling into the storm with a raw desperation that stripped away all his pride. "Cathy," he whispered, "coming." Lockwood fled Wuthering Heights that morning, but the moors had already claimed a piece of him. Desperate for answers, he turned to the housekeeper at Thrushcross Grange, a woman named Nellie Dean. And that's when the real story began, a story that started long before hatred had taken root in the stone and soul of Wuthering Heights. Years earlier, the house belonged to the Earnshaw family. It was a rough, wild place, but not yet cursed. Earnshaw ruled with a firm hand, and his children grew up untamed. Catherine Earnshaw was a child of the moors, fierce, willful, and free. Her brother, Henley, was cruel and resentful, a storm brewing even then. One night, Mr. Earnshaw returned from a trip to Liverpool with something unexpected. A child, a dark-skinned, silent, starved-looking boy he found on the streets. He had no name, no past. Mr. Earnshaw called him Heathcliff and brought him into the family, an act of charity that would become an act of fate. From the very first moment, Henley hated him. But Catherine didn't. She saw a reflection of her own wild spirit in the boy, something feral and unbroken. They became inseparable, running across the moors, sharing a world that no one else could enter. Their bond was deeper than friendship, forged in mischief and defiance. They belonged to each other. But when Mr. Earnshaw died, everything changed. Henley returned as the new master, his heart filled with bitterness. He immediately cast Heathcliff down, turning him from a brother into a common servant. Heathcliff was beaten, humiliated, and stripped of his dignity. Catherine raged against the injustice, but her anger couldn't stop the world from turning. One night, she and Heathcliff snuck over to Thrushcross Grange, the elegant home of the Linton family. Peeking through the windows, they were caught, and Catherine was injured. She was forced to stay there for weeks to recover, surrounded by silk, comfort, and gentle manners. When she returned to Wuthering Heights, she was different. Heathcliff saw it instantly. Her wild laughter had softened. Her words were more careful. She spoke of social status and what a young lady ought to be. She still loved him, of course she did, but that love was beginning to crack under the weight of society's expectations. Meanwhile, the young, handsome Edgar Linton had fallen for Catherine. He offered her everything Heathcliff couldn't: safety, respectability, a life of comfort. Where Heathcliff was a raging fire, Edgar was a gentle warmth. Catherine found herself torn between two worlds, her soul split in two. One evening, she confided in Nellie Dean. "I am Heathcliff," she declared, her voice full of passion. But then she added the words that would seal their fate. But I can marry him. It would degrade me. Heathcliff overheard, and without a word, without a goodbye, he vanished into the night. Catherine was devastated. She fell into a fever, haunted by what she had done, by the half of her soul she had just thrown away. But she couldn't undo her choice. She married Edgar Linton and became the mistress of Thrushcross Grange. Trying to bury her regret under layers of refinement, years passed. Life settled into a fragile peace. And then, one day, Heathcliff returned. He was no longer the beaten, ragged boy who had fled into the darkness. He came back a wealthy, polished, and dangerously handsome man. But beneath the surface, he was as cold as winter steel. The boy was gone. In his place stood a man forged in the fires of revenge. He hadn't come back for forgiveness. He came back to destroy the world that had stolen everything from him. Catherine's joy at his return was a dangerous, consuming flame. Edgar saw the old passion reignite, and the fragile peace of their home shattered. Old wounds were torn open, and love curdled into poison. Beneath it all, a dark, destructive force was unleashed, a force that would not be satisfied even by death. Because on these moors, a love like theirs doesn't just end. It waits, it festers, and it will claim everyone. When Heathcliff returned, it wasn't with a crash of thunder. It came quietly, like a sickness you don't feel until it's already taken hold. He walked into Thrushcross Grange after years away, and Catherine almost dropped her glass. For a moment, the whole room seemed to tilt. The past was standing right there in front of her. But this wasn't the boy who was beaten into silence. This was a man sharpened by suffering. Heathcliff bowed, his politeness so perfect it felt like a sneer. His voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. But underneath it, you could feel something coiled and dangerous. Catherine laughed and cried and talked all at once. Her husband, Edgar, watched from the doorway, a cold unease spreading through him. He saw Heathcliff for what he was, not just a rival for Catherine's love, but a threat to their entire world. The moors felt it too. The storm seemed to gather faster after he came back. The wind howled longer, the nights felt heavier. Like the land itself hated the fragile peace Catherine was trying to keep. Heathcliff didn't hide. He moved back into Wuthering Heights, which was now falling apart under Henley's drunken rule. Henley, ruined by gambling, actually welcomed Heathcliff, not realizing he was walking right into a perfectly laid trap. Heathcliff never forgot a single insult. He loaned Henley money, encouraged his drinking, and calmly watched as the master of Wuthering Heights slid into debt and despair. Revenge, for Heathcliff, was a dish best served slowly, savored with every bite. Meanwhile, Catherine was coming undone. Her joy at seeing Heathcliff twisted into something else: agitation, jealousy, a reckless need to provoke. She demanded Edgar accept Heathcliff's visits, laughed at his discomfort, and then flew into a rage when he finally protested. "You're cruel," Edgar told her one night, his voice trembling. "Cruel to both of us." Catherine just stared at him. "You don't understand," she said. "I cannot live without my soul." But Edgar understood enough. The house fractured. Nellie, the housekeeper, watched helplessly as Catherine's moods grew more violent. One minute, she'd be clinging to Heathcliff, her eyes shining with a feverish light. The next, she collapsed into sobs, accusing both men of destroying her. When Edgar finally banned Heathcliff from the house, Catherine locked herself in her room. She refused to eat, refused to talk. "I will break their hearts by breaking my own," she declared. And she did. The illness crept in like a fog, leaving her with pale cheeks and hollow eyes. She started talking to ghosts, calling for the moors, begging the walls to open up and let her run free. Heathcliff was brought to her bedside just once. The air in the room crackled with the force of their final confrontation. "You loved me," he said, his voice low and savage. "You destroyed me." She reached for him, desperate. "I am dying," she whispered. "I can't live without my life. I can't live without my soul." Their embrace wasn't tender. It was violent. filled with years of longing and blame twisted so tightly together they couldn't be pulled apart. When Heathcliff left that room, something inside him shattered forever. Catherine died that night. Snow fell softly on the moors, covering everything as if trying to erase what had happened. Edgar mourned with quiet, deep grief. But Heathcliff didn't mourn. He raged. He went to Catherine's grave and cursed her for leaving him. He begged her ghost to haunt him, to drive him mad, to never let him rest. "Be with me always," he cried out to the wind. "Take any form. Just don't leave me in this abyss." After Catherine's death, Heathcliff's revenge became his only purpose. He took complete control of Wuthering Heights, crushing Henley, who died a broken man. Henley left behind a son, Hareton, the rightful heir. But Heathcliff wouldn't give him the mercy of a quick end. Instead, he raised Hareton in ignorance and cruelty, turning him into a reflection of his own stolen childhood. Thrushcross Grange wasn't safe either. Edgar's sister, Isabella, foolishly mistook Heathcliff's darkness for passion and married him. Her marriage became a prison. Heathcliff treated her with open contempt, using her as another weapon against Edgar. She finally escaped, battered in body and spirit, but she was pregnant with Heathcliff's son, Linton. Years passed. The next generation grew up under the shadow of old sins. There was Cathy, Catherine's daughter, spirited and bright, her laughter a cruel echo of her mother's. There was Hareton, rough and resentful, never knowing what was stolen from him. And then there was Linton, Heathcliff's sickly, fearful son, another pawn in his father's vengeful game. Heathcliff watched Cathy with an unsettling intensity. Seeing the mother he lost and could never have, the past refused to stay buried. The dead whispered through the walls of Wuthering Heights, and Heathcliff, after destroying everyone around him, discovered a terrible truth. Revenge didn't silence love. It only made it louder. At night, he saw Catherine's face in the darkness. He heard her footsteps on the moors. He felt her presence in empty rooms. The living were afraid of him. But Heathcliff was afraid of something else entirely. He was afraid that Catherine was waiting for him, and that when she finally came to take him, she wouldn't come alone. Time never healed Wuthering Heights. Instead, it thickened the shadows. Years passed, but the house remained frozen, its stones soaked with memory and old violence. The moors still howled, and the wind still battered the windows, demanding payment for something long overdue. Heathcliff was now master of everything Wuthering Heights, Thrushcross Grange, but his victory tasted like ash. All his enemies lay defeated at his feet, yet the gnawing hunger inside him was never satisfied, because Catherine was still gone. Or worse, she was never gone at all. He saw her everywhere, in the way the mist rose at dawn, in the mournful cry of the wind at night. He saw her in the sharp, defiant laughter of Cathy Linton, her daughter, who carried Catherine's eyes like an accusation. Young Cathy grew up under Heathcliff's watchful, predatory gaze, completely unaware of the invisible chains he was quietly fastening around her future. She found herself drawn to Wuthering Heights, curious about the forbidden house and the brooding, terrifying man who ruled it. And there, she met Hareton Earnshaw. He was rough, uneducated, and filled with a deep, simmering resentment. His natural intelligence had been buried under years of neglect and deliberate cruelty. Heathcliff watched the two of them together with a cold, grim satisfaction. This, he believed, was justice. This was poetry. Catherine's bloodline, bound to the boy he had systematically ruined, just as he himself had been ruined. Then, Linton Heathcliff arrived from the south like a ghost, a weak, sickly boy trembling with fear. He hated Wuthering Heights and was terrified of his father. Heathcliff felt no affection for him. Linton was just another tool, a final, crucial move in a dark game played across generations. Cathy, seeing his weakness, pitied Linton, and Heathcliff encouraged it. He manipulated their meetings, isolated them from the world, and forced an intimacy that should never have existed. In his weakness, Linton became cruel, using emotional blackmail to bind Cathy to him, trapping her with her own kindness. When Cathy's father, Edgar Linton, fell gravely ill, Heathcliff struck his final, merciless blow. He lured Kathy to Wuthering Heights and locked her away, refusing to let her go to her dying father's side unless she agreed to marry Linton. With no other choice, she consented. Edgar passed away, believing his daughter was safe and her future secure. He was tragically wrong. Linton's fragile body soon collapsed under the weight of his illness and fear, and he died shortly after their marriage. Kathy found herself imprisoned at Wuthering Heights, a young widow, utterly alone among her enemies. Heathcliff had finally won. He had everything he ever wanted. He had destroyed all who had wronged him, but his victory brought no peace. Instead, something inside him began to break. The carefully constructed walls of his revenge started to crumble. Food lost its taste. Sleep abandoned him completely. He took to wandering the moors at night, his eyes burning, talking to shadows only he could see. His housekeeper, Nellie, was the first to notice the change. His rage no longer had an outward target. His vengeance had run out of fuel. "I cannot eat," he muttered to her one day. "I cannot rest. She is with me always." Catherine's presence, once accompanying torment, was becoming unbearable. Heathcliff spoke to her as if she were standing right beside him. He accused her. He begged her. He pleaded with her to finally appear, not as a whisper or a memory, but as something solid enough to end his suffering. "I have destroyed everything you ever loved," he cried out into the empty night. "Why do you still deny me?" The Moors answered only with silence. Then, slowly, something unexpected began to bloom in the darkness of Wuthering Heights. Kathy and Hareton, both of them victims of a cruelty they didn't choose, found each other. It started with hostility, then grew into a reluctant understanding, and then something softer, something far more dangerous. Kathy began to teach Hareton to read. She saw the intelligent man buried beneath the coarse exterior, and he, in turn, saw the kindness she tried to hide. Heathcliff watched them, and a strange, profound exhaustion settled over him. Their anger mirrored his own youth, but their growing tenderness disturbed him more than hatred ever could. They were repeating the past, yes, but they were correcting it. "I have lost the faculty of enjoying their destruction," Heathcliff admitted to Nellie one evening, his voice hollow and distant. "It is as if my revenge has devoured itself." Catherine's ghost pressed closer. He saw her more clearly now than ever before in his waking dreams, in the very air he breathed. The world of the living was thinning around him, fading into gray. He no longer interfered with Kathy and Hareton. He no longer cared. His all-consuming obsession had turned completely inward. "I only want to be where she is," he whispered. One stormy night, Heathcliff did not come down from his room. The wind battered Wuthering Heights with a supernatural fury. Doors rattled on their hinges, and windows shook in their frames. The next morning, Nellie forced her way into his room. She found him lying on the bed, soaked by the rain that had blown in through the open window. His eyes were wide open. His expression was one of absolute peace, and a strange, triumphant smile touched his lips. He was buried beside Catherine, just as he had demanded so long ago. The villagers swore that even in death, he could not be separated from her, and the Moors seemed to agree. After Heathcliff's death, the very air of Wuthering Heights lightened. The oppressive weight was gone. Kathy and Hareton planned to leave the grim old house behind and start a new life at Thrushcross Grange, a place where love no longer had to scream to be heard. They spoke of spring, of rebuilding, of a future untouched by ghosts. But some things refused to rest. Travelers on the moors began to tell stories. They claimed to see the figures walking together in the dusk, a man and a woman, side by side, never touching, but never parting. The wind seemed to carry the sound of their laughter and their sorrow, all intertwined. And those who saw them felt no fear, only a sense of awe, because Wuthering Heights was never just a story about revenge. It was a story about a love so fierce, so powerful, that it refused to recognize the boundaries of life and death. A love that didn't ask for permission. A love that would haunt the earth until the earth itself learned to remember it. And on quiet nights, when the wind bends the grass low and the sky presses close, the more still whisper their names, Catherine, Heathcliff, together, at last. Thanks for watching. If you were as captivated by this story as I am, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales of love, loss, and the ghosts we leave behind.